Okay, so this is a short little video. It's going to be talking about how do we put all this stuff together, how do we actually graph one of these things. So on question number 1 on your assignment, we have the equation y equals negative 3x squared minus 30x minus 72. First thing it's asking for is for the axis of symmetry. Like we wrote down in the last video, that's x is equal to negative b divided by 2 times a. So I'm going to start by just kind of filling it in. So we have a negative of b, and b in this case is negative 30, divided by 2 times a. And a this time would be the negative 3. So we start to work it out. Now the negative of negative 30 would be a positive 30, divided by 2 times negative 6, or negative 3 would be negative 6. 30 divided by negative 6 would be negative 5. Tells us our axis of symmetry is x equals negative 5. Next thing we need to do is we need to find its vertex. Now the vertex is pretty simple. We take our answer from the last question, we substitute it into the x values. So we got negative 3 times negative 5 squared minus 30 times negative 5 minus 72. Okay, we work all that out and we get y is equal to 3. And so that's going to tell us, our vertex, the actual location of it, would be at negative 5, 3. Our x-intercepts. Okay, sorry about that. Our x-intercepts come from factoring. So when I take a look at this equation, negative 3x squared minus 30x minus 72, the first thing that I notice is I can have a GCF of negative 3. So I take out a negative 3. When I do that, that leaves us with x squared plus 10x plus 24. Now that's a pretty easy equation to factor. X squared breaks up into x times x. 24, the correct factors would be 6 plus 4, at which point we set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. So x plus 6 equals 0, and x plus 4 equals 0. Subtract 6 on the one on the left, we get x equals negative 6. The one on the right, we subtract 4 on each side, we get x equals negative 4. Now the last thing we really need to look at is this graph going to open up or is it going to open down? Well, in this case, since the equation starts off with negative 3, that's going to be an opening down. So let's go put all this stuff on graph paper and just kind of see how this is going to look. Okay, so our first problem, on problem number 1, first thing we are going to put on our graph is our vertex. So negative 5, 3. Okay, second thing we're going to draw on here is our x-intercepts. So on our x-axis, we're going to find negative 6, we're going to find negative 4. Connect the dots, and voila, we're finished. The only other thing we need to really make sure we have on our graph is the axis of symmetry. Now the axis of symmetry passes through that vertex. We're going to draw it as a dotted line and label it. And that's all we have to do on the graphing part. Now problem number 2. Problem 2, we have the equation y equals 2x squared minus 8x plus 6. So again, axis of symmetry. First thing we're going to start off with by looking at is x equals negative b divided by 2 times a. In this case, we have b is negative 8. So we have a negative of negative 8 divided by 2 times a, which in this case was 2. Start to work it out. The two negatives cancel out, make a positive 8. Divided by 2 times 2, which is 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Axis of symmetry is x equals 2. To find the vertex now, we're going to replace both of these x's with x equals 2. And just kind of work it out. So we have y equals 2 times 2 squared minus 8 times 2 plus 6. Now we're going to run that through through a calculator, and we get y equals negative 2. So that's going to tell us our coordinate is x is positive 2 from our axis of symmetry. Our y coordinate is negative 2 from plugging it in. Next thing we have to do is we have to find the x-intercepts. Find the x-intercepts by factoring. So we had 2x squared minus 8x plus 6. I notice that there's a GCF of 2 here, so I'm going to take out a 2. When I do that, that leaves us with x squared minus 4x plus 3. Now I need to factor that equation, and that would factor to x subtract 3, x subtract 1. Take both my factors, set them equal to 0, and solve for x. So x subtract 3 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0. Do plus 3, x equals 3. Do plus 1 on both sides on the second equation, and I get x equals positive 1. The last thing, would this graph open up or down? Well, this graph is going to open up because the equation 2x starts with 2x squared, which is positive. Now, I'm going to put this all on a graph and just kind of go from there. So the first thing we had was our vertex at 2, negative 2. Next thing we had was our x-intercepts. Our x-intercepts were at positive 1 and positive 3. We know the graph is opening up, so we're going to get a nice little graph that looks something like that. And that's really all we got to do on this. You find your vertex and you find your x-intercepts, and that's all. If you have any questions, you need to let me know. This is due when when we meet again on Thursday. Have a good night.